most pleased to introduce our speaker today. As many are aware, Ron really needs little of an introduction. He's one of us and well known at our meetings to engage many of our speakers with very provocative and incisive questions, as well as handing out earned plaudits to our speakers. He is a fellow educator and one whom I've known for quite a few years, and in keeping with his topic, I am not, and I don't know whether Ron is, really sure of how long we've known each other, but it's in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 years. Ron has been an active Rotarian, as many of you know, involved with, one of my first recollections was sitting in a tractor trailer in London Mall selling fireworks. That goes way back. The elegant rummage sale, of course, was probably the biggest one that involved so many of us, and Ron was there, along with his wife Sandy, in the clothing department for several years. And bingos, of course, have been a standby for Ron as a member of the crew, and we enjoy his company whenever we're together. He was born and raised in London, attended UWO, Collège Militaire Royal, Wayne State, and University of Toronto. As a teacher, he specialized in special education and held a variety of positions in educational institutions, in public elementary schools, as a curriculum consultant, a school superintendent, and a lecturer at a number of colleges and universities in Canada and the United States. A very varied set of experiences. After retiring from this full career in education, he started his own business using his cross-disciplinary doctorate in administration and business, and he became an outspoken advocate for organizational change and was sought after as a motivational and organizational speaker at business and educational conferences across the country. He kept active in his younger years, he tells me, or his bio tells me, skiing and mountain hiking, and while at military college he boxed, swam, and fenced. So don't pick up any swords for Ron. One of his major interests has been flying, and he and his wife have flown, I guess, from the Arctic Circle down to the Caribbean and Central America, and he's had a close association with a number of flying friends. We've heard stories, some of which I understand are actually true, and had a really great time to be able to fly around from place to place. One of the consistent elements that Ron has always had was an interest and support for youth. First as an educator for several years, then as a Rotarian. He's been involved with the youth exchange program extensively over the years, visiting schools, interviewing potential candidates, and he and Sandy have served as host parents for, I understand, 3 different students, all from Norway, and Sandy said they were all beautiful blondes, so I'm sure Ron was quite pleased. Please join me in giving Ron a warm Rotary welcome. Ron.
Thanks, Jack. It's always nice to be able to count on somebody that knows you, really knows you, to be able to introduce you. I'm very pleased to have this chance to speak with you today. This issue of Alzheimer's, as was generally known, is a major concern. The interesting part about it is that most people coming close to Alzheimer's, either as family members or those afflicted, deny it. They don't want to talk about it. It's a major issue to even introduce it to somebody else. It's like a social disease or something. Well, I hope to be able to provide you with enough information, enough knowledge about this whole issue that we can remove some of the stigma about this, because I can tell you for sure, everyone in this room knows somebody, either as a relative or a friend, who is or will be afflicted with dementia before they die. And there's a whole lot that you can do to help those who are afflicted. So that's what I want to talk about. And I'm using me as a personal example. Not that this is what happens with everybody that gets dementia, because that isn't so. There are certain common elements which I'll share with you, but I just want to begin with me, because it's easier to begin with a personal self. Jack told you about my interest in flying. Yes, I've always been interested in flying ever since I was a little boy. I took my first pilot's license when I was 12 years old. Well, this story begins exactly 45 years ago this past Saturday, January 6, 1973. I was meeting with some people out at the airport because they had worked hard to construct what we call in the terminology an experimental aircraft. It wasn't really experimental, it was a proven design. All you had to do was build it according to the design and it would work. But there are certain rules in Canada with these rules that you had to get somebody who knows how to fly, a licensed pilot, and they had to put 10 hours on the aircraft, and they had to prove that that aircraft is airworthy before anybody else could do this. Now this particular airplane was a school project at Beale Secondary School. Some of the teachers there on staff led it, and the students there built that plane. So for me, with my educational connection, with my flying connection, it was personal. Now flying was, as you gather, is part of what my life was. And I had done a lot of this flight testing of experimental aircraft in the area, so it was not uncommon for me to be there. But I just want to describe a little bit about what happens. This airplane had no electrics on it. It was a cold, miserable day, just like last Saturday was. Cold. There was snow around, but not the degree of snow that we have today. And we hauled the airplane out from the hangar, and we tried to start it. And when you start an airplane without electrics, that means you've got to pull the propeller through and hope that enough fuel enters the thing at the right time and away it goes. Well, we got it going. After about an hour and a half of us freezing out there pulling the propeller, I taxied around for a while, testing everything. Everything seemed to work all right. I brought it back, talked to the kids and the teachers about their airplane, and I was going to take it up for its first flight. So we taxied out. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with flying, but around an airport, you have a prescribed pattern of flying. We call that the circuit. So you fly straight out, then you turn right, then you turn right again, and you're coming back parallel to the runway you took off from, and then you come right again, and you're on base leg. This is the last leg before you turn and you land. On the base leg, about 900 feet above ground, the motor stopped. No warning, it just stopped. Now, as a pilot, you're trained to expect that. Almost from the first lesson you take, you're taught how to deal with things when the motor stops. But this was for real. It stopped. My choice was, where am I landing it? Not when, but where, because now is the time. Off to the left was a big field, old sod farm, covered with snow. Well, I really didn't want to go in there. And there was the runway, right there. And I tried to make it to the runway. So I turned. Now, no electrics meant no radios. So I had a hand radio that I could talk to the tower. They like you to talk to them. They appreciate that kind of communication. So I told them that I had an engine failure, and they asked, am I declaring an emergency? And I said, no, I don't want an emergency, because I'll spend the next 3 days filling in paperwork for the government. And what did I want to do? I was going to land at the airport. Well, that was fine. So they pushed their emergency buttons and things started there. I wasn't really worried about them. I was more worried about me and the ground coming up faster than I was able to. So I'm on now on final, and the airplane flies at a certain speed. If you go below that speed, the airplane will fall. We call it a stall. The point of landing an airplane is you want to bring it down just above that stall speed so that when you're ready to touch the ground, the airplane runs out of flying speed. Well, I was coming down, everything fine, except the runway wasn't getting close enough. I'm coming down, and if you can imagine, I got approach lights on the left. These are the approach lights for the runway, and it's a snowy thing. I'm coming down, and I know I'm not going to make the runway, so I have to land on that approach path. And just as I'm about to land on that approach path, I realize there's a ditch in the snow right across that approach path. I didn't have any more flying speed. I was committed completely. I landed that airplane at about 55 mile an hour straight into the ditch. Couldn't stop. I don't remember anything for 12 days. My head, apparently, because I had a seatbelt on, my head went forward into the instrument panel. My forehead was crushed. This eye was crushed. You wonder why I wear an eye patch? Well, that's why. This eye was ruined. Sandy had a decision that first night at the hospital. The doctors warned her, that they had to remove this eye because it was damaged, and sympathetic nerve damage would take the vision away from this eye. Her choice was, leave me alone and safe, and I'll be blind if I live, or take it out. The risk was that the slight trauma in my critical condition of removing this eye might kill me. She made the right decision. Now, I point this out because this is a trigger. I didn't know this until a year ago. But this was the trigger for the problems I have today. At that time of the accident, when I woke up 12 days later in the hospital, in a coma, I was assessed with MBD. MBD is minimal or maximal, depending which way you want to take it, minimal brain damage. 45 years ago, MBD. What did I find? I couldn't remember the names of people around me. I knew Sandy's name. That stuck with me. But my secretary at the office, I couldn't remember her name. I remember going to the office a week after I got out of the hospital, and fortunately I was working at the education center, and we had lots of people I knew, and I was sitting there in the cafeteria, and I couldn't remember 80% of them. Just didn't know them. I couldn't remember the accident. Nothing. Still can't remember the accident. It was gone. And an interesting feature, which is part of the trigger I'm talking about, is that I couldn't smell anything. My smeller was all gone. I talked to the neurologist about it, and he says, can you still taste something? And I said, yeah, I can still taste. Nothing tastes right. It's like my whole taste spectrum was moved over. It all tastes funny. And he says, that's all right, you'll live with that one. But if you can still taste something, your smeller will come back. Well, it did 2 years later. 2 years later, it came back. So that was my state. That was MBD. August, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, I was assessed now with MCI. MCI as minor cognitive impairments. Minor cognitive impairments is the beginning stage of dementia. That's where we're at. There are 13 forms of dementia. Parkinson's is a form of dementia. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. Alzheimer's takes about 80% of all the cases of people with dementia. At this stage, I don't know whether I got Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something else. I have no idea. But I do know I have minor cognitive impairments. And as I say, that's the first stage. And when I say the first stage, because this is critical to where we're all going to come to eventually, because you're going to be looking at people and wondering if they've got, quote, Alzheimer's. What you're really wondering is if they got dementia. Is that our development reaches a peak. For some people, it's in their 50s, and some people, it's in their 60s. For some people like me, it's in my later 70s. But you reach a peak, and then it levels off, and then it starts a decline. And eventually you die. That's what life's about. That's a normal kind of life. You reach that peak, you level off, then you go on a decline. People with the dementia issue level off, they got MCI. What do we know with MCI? Because that decline is steeper than normal. And they continue down that path. The normal people are proceeding down, but the MCI people are proceeding faster. When you reach the point, or past the beginning stages, you're into moderate stuff. And moderate stuff is where now you can no longer care for yourself adequately. Somebody has to see to it that you're fed. Somebody has to see to it that you're safe, that you're not wandering around the streets, that you got your proper clothes on. People have to keep you in touch with what today is. The final stage down there is a terrible time because it's the time when you can't do anything, period. You can't eat. People have to feed you. People have to clean you. People have to wash you. People have to dress you. You reach a point where people are even going to have to pump air into you so you can breathe. A lot of people wait to that final stage. Some people don't. And here in Canada now we have an option, as you know, through the term is MAID, M-A-I-D, medical assistance in dying. They used to call it physician-assisted dying pad. And there's a PASS too. I forget what it stands for. I forget a number of things now. Anyway, now I want to tell you a little bit about me and this condition. Because here, as I said, I've got MCI now. No longer MBD, I got MCI. Here's one of the triggers I found interesting. To me, I just kind of laugh at my own life. I always have. But a year or so ago, I was attending a conference for people here in the area with Alzheimer's, and particularly for their care providers. And we had conference people up there and physicians going through their research studies. And this lady was talking about what damages you get up here in the frontal lobe. And she said to me, or she said to us, that frontal lobe is responsible for your feelings, empathy. Bingo. A light went on with me because I've had a problem in the past 10 years with empathetic reaction. All my life, I've dealt with very sad stories, with people with severe problems, all kinds of problems, and families and issues. I've delivered obituaries with friends and colleagues. I can handle all that. But today, I have an increasing amount, an overwhelming response to something that develops a feeling in me. It can be a simple thing as watching a choir sing a Christmas carol. It can be a picture of a child on TV doing something. And I just get all choked up. I can be talking in a normal conversation like I am right now with you, and all of a sudden a feeling will be there in this frontal lobe, and I got no control. I get all choked up. I never had that feeling before until this past few years. Another thing I'm finding out is that I can still smell stuff today, but my sense of taste has moved off. Another whole spectrum. I couldn't tell you what I ate today from taste alone, because it doesn't taste like anything I ever had before in my life. So eating food today is a bit of an adventure. Now, one of the problems I've got, because I have a lot of people tell me, particularly here in the club and elsewhere, You don't seem like you've got Alzheimer's. You sure you got Alzheimer's? Well, unfortunately, I am sure because I've got MCI. I've got these cognitive impairments. An example of a cognitive impairment. I can't do any handwriting now. I can barely sign my name. It's a struggle to sign my name. I have to put a mark on a page to suffice, but to write a note to myself is impossible. That's one problem. When I went to military college, given my flying background, I wanted to be in aeronautical engineering. Math, to me, all my life was a relatively simple thing. I thoroughly enjoyed mathematics. Today, I can't do simple arithmetic. I have a problem at bingo night. I can't do my share of work because one of the first things you do at bingo, you got to count up all those pieces of paper that people buy, and I lose count by the time I get to 20. That's a cognitive impairment. I find, now it's hard to believe, but I used to be a wordsmith. You heard about my speaking thing. I could get up, talk in front of any group, talk about it. I could write papers. I've written 48 professional papers in my professional life. That's more than most university professors write. I could do that because I was good with words. Today I have a real problem with words. I'll be talking with people and I want to say something and my mind will go on this word search looking for the word. And by the time I figured out what the word is that I want to use, I've forgotten what I was trying to say in the first place. I'm just giving you an example of what it's like to live with me, but I just remember I'm still right at the beginning stage. I'm appreciating this. My concern, and apart from explaining me, as I told you at the beginning today, I want you to be more aware of how these things happen. Because what I found, a wonderful resource here in London, Dina Boone, Dina, wave your hand. Dina is intake coordinator for the Alzheimer's Society here in London. My assessment physician, when she assessed me as having MCI, recommended that I get in touch with the Alzheimer's Society, which I did. Oh, thank goodness I did. These are a group of people who are there to assist people with Alzheimer's, but particularly the people who care about people with Alzheimer's. Well, I can still drive downtown and get home most of the time. I can't necessarily believe I'm going to do that next year. In other words, I'm becoming increasingly dependent upon my wife. Now, if my wife was like a lot of wives, oh, you don't have Alzheimer's, you're just getting old, you're just as stupid as you ever were.
I agree with that.
We've got a problem. We've got a problem. There are people, you will know people. I'll just give you an example. This is my sister. I have 3 sisters. This is the middle one. She's about 12 years younger than I am. She lives out in the way at the north end of Vancouver Island. There's nothing out there but cougars and fish. And she's got a wonderful husband. Well, my sister Doreen comes to visit her family here in the East once a year. About 3 or 4 years ago, our family here in the East noticed that Doreen has problems. She has problems communicating. She couldn't walk. She had problems with her handshake, which was a real problem for her because she likes embroidery and all that kind of fine stuff. So we're here and she's out there in nowhere. We communicate a little bit with her husband, and I pick her up this year at the airport, 6:30 in the morning. It's a rainy, miserable, rotten day in October. And on the way in from the airport, she says to me, plaintive voice from the back seat, "How do you know you got Alzheimer's?" Communications with my sister is always a bit of accusatory kind of thing. Well, I answered as best as I could from the front seat. But what I realized from that plaintive cry in the back seat was, how do you know you got it? Because I think I got it and I don't know. And in talking a little further with her husband, I find out that Doreen got in for an assessment with a specialist, and the specialist reviewed things with her, I presume, much as people did here in London. And Doreen came out of that assessment angry, absolutely angry. Now, my sister isn't 5 feet, tiny little person. When she was first out in BC at 18, 19 years of age, she literally ran her own trap line, and she didn't weigh 90 pounds. Something was raiding her trap line, so she went out with her toboggan and her rifle, staked out the trap that she was having problems with, and shot a bear. She butchered the bear, dragged it back on her toboggan back home. So I'm just trying to tell you, my dear sister is no nincompoop. She's a tough little lady. But she was crying out when she asked for, how did you know it got Alzheimer's? And when she got out of their doctor's office, after the doctor read all the assessment and did all that kind of stuff, she was angry, thoroughly angry, and she screamed at her husband, that damn doctor thinks I'm crazy. Well, knowing my sister, I can understand her reaction. But the doctor was trying to convey to her that she's got MCI and all these stages that she's going to go through. So we spent a fair amount of time during this visit telling her how to get help, reassuring her, and particularly helping her husband as to how to reach help, because it's this greater community, and it's the people who you know who are going to carry somebody through this long decline of dementia. So I'm just asking you to be a little more aware and sensitive. It is not a social disease. We can talk about it. And if you want some answers to your question, hook up to the Alzheimer's. Dina has some information here too. You can get it I get wonderful information on the website from our society and from the Alzheimer's Society of America. It's wonderful. So if you have any concern about it, look it up, because it's there. And you can really help people who need it for the rest of their life. Thank you.